Do you have a paranormal encounter you'd like to share with us? Send us an email with your story for a chance of it being featured on Weird World. Take a step back into the 1980s and 90s as we delve into 3 more true extraordinary stories of paranormal encounters. From an eerie house in the Netherlands, a deserted street in New York, to the desert of Arizona, here are 3 tales of strange and authentic experiences to inspire both terror and awe. Creature under the truck. In 1998, Cornwall, New York, during the late hours of a summer night at around 2 a.m, Justin Tucker and his friend found themselves strolling down a sidewalk near Justin's rural childhood home. They were not accustomed to walking, usually opting to skateboard, but due to a recent tar and gravel repavement of the nearby street, this was unfeasible. The sidewalk wasn't a viable alternative either, its surface being cracked, crumbled and overgrown, all the while being disrupted by the roots of the towering oak trees lining the path. The street, poorly maintained even before the new layer of pavement, always forced the duo to walk, which they did, following the same slow, monotonous route, as only one side of the street had a walkway. Across the street there was a quaint house with a large pickup truck parked in its driveway. Upon observing it out of the corner of his eye, Justin spotted something darting under the truck, causing both boys to halt in their tracks. Whatever it was, it had triggered the motion detector, which in turn had illuminated the outdoor light above the garage. However, what halted them was not the sudden movement, but rather the eerie way the figure moved. It seemed to be some kind of bipedal creature, its skin seeming hairless and of an odd yellowish tint. The 2 friends were left speechless, standing frozen as they stared at the shadowy space beneath the truck where the creature had vanished. The pickup itself had had a lift kit installed, its tyres significantly larger and broader than standard ones, elevating the vehicle's body significantly higher than the usual height. The driveway was brightly illuminated by the floodlight installed above the garage of the house. After several seconds of heart-stopping suspense, 2 hands appeared on the inner edge of the truck's rear tyre. The creature placed its fingers down in a chillingly deliberate sequence. Pinkies first, followed by ring, middle, and then index fingers. Gradually, the entity, bald, earless, spherical head, peeked out to check whether they were still present. Its large yellowish eyes locked onto theirs before quickly retreating back into the truck's shadow. Rob and Justin screamed in terror and sprinted the remaining 50 feet to the road's intersection. There they hopped onto their skateboards and escaped the scene as quickly as possible. They pushed themselves and their skateboards to the limit for a quarter mile or so, then stopped to regain their breath and to ask each other, in utter disbelief, what the hell was that thing? And dude, did you see that? What on earth was it? They confirmed each other's accounts, assuring themselves that they had indeed witnessed the same thing, and neither of them could even begin to guess what it was. It seemed to bear a slight resemblance to the small alien from the film Mac and Me, but it was far from the endearing, clumsy and dumpy creature portrayed on the screen. This creature seemed to have a more elongated form and motion which sent chills down both of their spines. The following day they decided to keep the incident to themselves, believing no one else would accept their inexplicable encounter. Had the roles been reversed, they too would have been sceptical of such a bizarre story. This extraordinary event catalysed Justin's relentless curiosity, a curiosity that has grown and deepened with each passing day. UFO Hunting. In 1982 in Maricopa County, Arizona, Don Warwick found himself immersed in the most peculiar encounter of his life. He had been hunting at Table Mesa late one afternoon and was on his way back to camp on a narrow dirt road. The road ascended over a berm, and as he reached the other side, Don spotted a light shining upwards. He initially assumed it was an oncoming truck. Wishing to avoid a collision, Don swiftly moved his vehicle off the road, parking it amidst the sparse desert vegetation. As he waited for the apparent truck to pass, he began to notice something odd. The light remained stationary. Intrigued, Don decided to investigate. He clambered up the berm for a better view of what lay beyond. That's when he made an astonishing discovery. A spacecraft was on the other side of the berm, and it wasn't alone. In the craft, there were strange-looking beings. They were short, standing only 3 to 4 feet tall, with large, penetrating eyes. The reality of the situation gripping him, Dom raised his gun, aiming at the creatures. They spotted him almost immediately, and with an urgent, swift motion retreated back into the spacecraft. Panic surged through Don, and he hurriedly descended from the berm. As he ran haphazardly through the desert, a jumping cactus tripped him, its spines embedding into his leg. But his pain was momentarily forgotten as the spacecraft lifted off the ground and soared towards him. It halted directly above him, hovering in midair for about 15 seconds. Then, with an unexpected burst of speed, it shot upwards and disappeared into the night sky. A Paranormal Life. In 1999 in Groningen, Netherlands, Mark Jansen and his mother resided in a peculiar house where a series of unexplained incidents took place. At the age of 9, Mark's mother recounted an incident where she'd seen lights through the rear window of their home. Curiosity piqued, she decided to investigate. As she opened the door, she was met with a shocking sight, a colossal spaceship looming over their garden. The sight instilled such fear into her that she quickly retreated inside and locked the door. She shared this eerie event with Mark a few days later, which reminded him of the lights he had also noticed. That very night, he experienced a strange dream involving an ambulance parked in their backyard, an impossible scenario given its small size. His mother owned 2 businesses, often requiring her to work till late. One such night, close to midnight, Mark found himself at home with his brother. He was comfortably nestled in his high sleeper, a red iron bed with a desk underneath it, reading a Donald Duck book. Barely a few minutes had passed when he heard footsteps ascending the stairs. Initially, he dismissed the noise until an unsettling feeling that swept over him quickly made him sit up. The steps ceased and Mark, thinking he might have been mistaken, resumed his reading. Then, barely 20 seconds later, the sound returned, growing closer. Overcome by fear, he retreated under his blanket, his book serving as a makeshift shield. The footsteps continued, entering his room, and to his utter terror, ascending the ladder to his bed. A presence settled next to his head, its weight making his heart pound out of his chest. He was too terrified to peek from beneath his book, paralysed by the unseen horror. His mind began to spin with frenzied thoughts, his body still frozen in shock. The duration of this ordeal was hard to determine, but his mother's absence spanned at least a few hours. The jingle of his mother's keys in the door lock broke the tension and gave him the courage to leap out of bed and let out a scream. It was, without a doubt, the most terrifying experience he had ever encountered. Not long after this initial terrifying event, Mark found himself once again in the same room. This time, however, he was sharing it with his brother in the new bunk bed. His mother, having just given birth to his baby sister, was out locking up their shops. His brother had fallen asleep quickly, leaving Mark alone in the dark room, lost in his thoughts. About 10 minutes later, his eyes were drawn to a coloured dot on the wall. The dot was radiating a bright neon light, and then, to his astonishment, it started to multiply, resulting in a neat row of dots, each shifting across various neon colours. They transitioned from blue to pink to green, and even morphed into a colour Mark couldn't even recall ever seeing before. His fear spiked when he realised he could still see the dots even when his eyes were tightly closed. The frightening illusion seemed to be seared into his eyes. He tried to rouse his brother with fervent kicks to the upper bunk, but to no avail. The next thing he knew, he was waking up as though nothing out of the ordinary had happened. By the age of 11, Mark had experienced 3 distinct out-of-body experiences, all while he was engrossed watching television. These experiences left him terrified, as he would find himself mentally levitating above his body. Mark also had frequent encounters with unidentified flying objects, sighting more than 50 throughout his life. These sightings seemed to form a peculiar bond that he couldn't quite articulate. The most vivid encounter he remembered was seeing a UFO up close, a mere metre or two from his window, when he was 9 years old. In the face of this series of inexplicable occurrences, Mark began to perceive himself as distinct from other people. he frequently felt a sense of disconnection, as though he had a unique perspective on the world that others did not share. His thought process and abilities seemed somewhat inexplicable. For example, he possessed an unusually vibrant ability to visualize objects, images, and people with great detail, irrespective of whether he was observing them directly or closing his eyes, through his mind's eye. This was a routine experience for him. Furthermore, he seemed to develop an uncanny ability to interpret body language and to form remarkable inferences as to what people were thinking. His dreams often held a prophetic quality, appearing to preview future events. When an event did come to pass, he experienced an intense feeling of déjà vu, a sense that had lived through the situation before. Initially, he found it all difficult to believe, but the sheer frequency of these events soon eroded his skepticism. They were not mere dreams, but something more profound. At times, his life felt like it had a cinematic quality to it, as if these experiences somehow wove into some grander narrative. Yet he was well aware of his sanity. He reassured himself that he wasn't being delusional. From his earliest memories to his current age, Mark has experienced an extraordinary number of unexplainable phenomena which continue to occur in his life. So much so that he said it would be impossible to put them all down into writing.